U.S. Geological Survey said an earthquake with a magnitude of 7.4 struck central New Zealand just after midnight. The quake knocked out power in some areas and sent people into the streets of the capital of Wellington. Advising residents on the South Island's east coast to seek higher ground, New Zealand's Civil Defence issued a tsunami warning. The tremor was measured by New Zealand's GeoNet at a magnitude of 6.6.
We begin with the latest news from the magnitude 7.8 earthquake which has struck New Zealand. At least 6 strong aftershocks measuring more than magnitude 5 have been felt in the region. The tremors knocked out power in some areas and sent people into streets across the country. A tsunami hit the northeast coast of the South Island, and New Zealand's Civil Defence asked residents on the east coast of the island to seek higher ground. The U.S. Geological Survey says the quake was just 10 kilometres deep and struck 91 kilometres northeast of the city of Christchurch soon after midnight.
A magnitude 5 earthquake rocks Quezon province. The earthquake, which hit the afternoon of Thursday, November 10th, was also felt in Metro Manila and Tarlac City. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology originally recorded the quake as a 4.4 at its epicenter in General Nakar. The force was eventually upgraded to a magnitude of 5. The force of a magnitude 5 earthquake is classified as moderate, according to the modified Mercalli intensity scale. This means the quake is widely felt and may cause minor damage, such as broken windows and dishes, as well as tipping of unstable furniture. While no significant damage has been reported, the Volcanology and Seismology Institute says aftershocks were to be expected.
According to officials, dozens of buildings sustained substantial damage after a 5.0 magnitude earthquake struck an Oklahoma town on Sunday night. In a statement, a spokesman said that 40 to 50 buildings were damaged in the earthquake, which was the third in Oklahoma this year with a magnitude of 5.0 or greater. No major injuries have been reported. Sunday's quake was centered 1 mile west from the town of Cushing and about 25 miles south of where a magnitude 4.3 quake recently forced a shutdown of several oil wells last week. The quake struck around 8 p.m. Sunday night and was reportedly felt as far away as Iowa, Illinois, and Texas.
After 60 years in hiding, tropical bedbugs are re-emerging across Florida. We're talking about a bedbug that can spread at double the rate of normal bedbugs. It's basically a creepy, crawly cousin of the bedbug, only worse. Jen Holloway is live in our Tampa News Center with more on where this little critter is rearing its ugly head. Jen, this is gross.
My skin is crawling already. Well, this takes the old saying, don't let the bedbugs bite, to an entirely new level. Tropical bedbugs are apparently creeping back into the Sunshine State for the first time since the 1940s.
It's one of the nastiest kinds of bed bugs, and it's capable of spreading misery fast, far and wide. Plus, they're attracted to humans.
They are stimulated when we go to bed at night. We release a pheromone, and then from that pheromone, that attracts them.
It's now confirmed they were found in South Florida in a home on Merritt Island. But tropical or not, bed bug problems are becoming more and more frequent, along with the misery left behind after they leave their calling card. Swollen, red, itchy spotches on your skin. And the more they munch, the more they reproduce.
You get a female who gets a blood meal from someone, she can lay thousands of eggs and may not need another blood meal for some time, for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Unfortunately, these pests are almost impossible to find and hard to kill unless sprayed directly and repeatedly. So this newest bedbug addition, the tropical bedbug, only makes this problem even that much more difficult.
I spoke to a local pest control company this afternoon, and after recently being alerted by University of Florida researchers, they have been consistently sending in samples of the bed bugs that they're finding here in the Bay Area. Even they can't tell the difference because they are so small, so tiny, and so similar.
Because of extreme drought conditions and wildfire threats, a state of emergency is now in effect here in Tennessee. News Channel 5's Emily Luxon is live in Nashville to show us how this is impacting all of us. Emily.
Well, that's right. You know, this is normally a dry time of year, but this year the conditions have been pretty extreme. And take a look at this map. It pretty much sums everything up. It shows the entire state is impacted, but you can see Middle Tennessee is in a severe drought, while Southeast Tennessee is experiencing extreme or exceptional drought. And this is a situation that's keeping meteorologists at the National Weather Service busy.
There's been some wildfires in the eastern part of the state, and we're doing a call every morning with the fire agencies because of the concern with drought.
Borden says we haven't seen any rain in November, and September and October were some of the driest on record. We are down about 6 inches on the amount of rainfall for the year, and 8 Tennessee counties now have burn bans in effect, including Robertson County. The Smyrna Utilities Department has enacted voluntary water reductions and is asking everyone to conserve water by not watering their lawns or sidewalks or washing cars. And meteorologists say the bad news is, looking ahead to the next 3 months, not much is expected to change.
What the outlook is for the next 3 months is warmer and drier than normal. That doesn't mean that we're not going to have some cold snaps. It doesn't mean that we can't end up with snow. But overall, the average, the whole time period, the next 3 months, we should end up warmer and drier than normal.
And Tennessee is not the only state battling these dry conditions. Much of the Southeast and even the Southwest are seeing similar situations.
The crisis in South Sudan continues to be an issue of major concern for the international community. The UN says the country could slide into a genocide if violence escalates further. Hundreds of thousands have fled the country in search of safety. The EU, in an announcement made on Friday, said that it will release 78 million euros in emergency aid. This in a bid to alleviate the humanitarian crisis on the ground. CCTV's Mariam Zaidi reports from Brussels. A power grab in 2013 saw South Sudan spiral into a bloody crisis. Thousands of men, women and children have now been killed. The United Nations says that the country is at risk of genocide if violence escalates any further. Over 1 million have become refugees, fleeing South Sudan to neighbouring countries. On Friday, the European Commission announced that it will release a further 78 million euros in emergency aid to help those affected by the South Sudan crisis. The EU has already provided almost €500 million in aid for South Sudan to date. Friday's announcement for aid was made by the European Commissioner for Humanitarian Aid. He is currently in Uganda on a visit to refugee camps hosting people fleeing South Sudan. Numbers suggest that Uganda now hosts some 230,000 South Sudanese refugees. To give a breakdown of the new funds, 40 million will be allocated to humanitarian organisations in South Sudan. 30 million will be allocated to help displaced South Sudanese people in Uganda, and a further 8 million euros will be given for neighbouring Sudan.
South Korean President Park Geun-hye is facing mounting pressure to step down. More than 800,000 demonstrators marched in the capital to protest allegations that she let a friend meddle in state affairs. Saturday's rally in downtown Seoul was the largest so far in a crisis engulfing Park. Students and families, including young couples pushing strollers and protesters in wheelchairs, were among the crowd during the peaceful march, which contrasted with the violence of some previous rallies dominated by militant unions and civic groups that clashed with police.
Hundreds of thousands of South Koreans jammed the streets of the capital demanding the resignation of embattled President Park Geun-hye. Student and teacher groups, labor unions, religious organizations, activists and political parties held their own rallies. Some opposition lawmakers called for the prosecution of the president.
It's not about Chae Soon-sil, backed by the president, benefiting from government affairs. This scandal is about Park Geun-hye undermining the foundations of the country. So this should be called Park Geun-hye Gate. Park Geun-hye should be charged with treason for throwing the South Korean people into chaos.
Park's confidant, Chae Soon-sil, is being investigated for influence peddling and meddling in state affairs to generate millions in donations to charities she controlled. The South Korean leader now suffers the lowest approval rating at 5% of any president in history.
President Park Geun-hye earlier this week agreed to allow the legislature to choose a new prime minister. But opposition lawmakers hold a majority in parliament. They want the new prime minister chosen by them to have sweeping presidential powers.
Many South Koreans are reminded of the time when the country initially emerged from decades of dictatorial rule. Park Ki-won was a student activist in the 1980s.
We should now seek a fundamental solution and establish citizen democracy through citizen rebellion, rather than stitching up this situation and calling it fixed. I believe the question of who the next president is going to be, or which political power will take hold of the government, can be left to be decided as events unfold.
As night fell, protesters marched toward the Blue House, the presidential compound. With estimates of 1 million people participating, Saturday night's event was a larger demonstration than the anti-U.S. beef protests of 2008 or any other rally in the country in 3 decades.
The protesters clashed with police during a demonstration against Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in the German city of Cologne. Several thousand people, including pro-Kurdish demonstrators, attended the rally. The protest was held against Turkey's crackdown on dissent following a failed coup attempt against Erdogan in July. The protesters called for the German government and Europe to take political action against Ankara over the crackdown. They also demanded the German government put pressure on Turkey and make Erdogan reverse his, quote, anti-democratic policies. And several protesters are arrested following clashes with police in Cologne.
As the government continues its purge, the Defense Ministry said on Sunday Turkey suspended from duty 168 officers and 123 non-commissioned officers from its Navy over alleged links to a coup attempt in July. The statement said it also dismissed 15 officers and 4 non-commissioned officers from the Navy. Since the failed coup attempt, more than 110,000 judges, teachers, police, and civil servants have been suspended or dismissed. 36,000 have been formally arrested in a crackdown that President Tayyip Erdogan's critics say is quashing legitimate opposition. Late on Saturday, an Istanbul court formally arrested the chairman of opposition newspaper Cumhuriyet at Istanbul's main airport on Friday. That arrest came days after 9 of its executives and journalists were formally arrested.
It's Thursday morning. The first day banks are open to exchange 500 and 1,000 rupee notes that will soon be worthless into currency that can be used. In a move that came as a surprise to an entire nation of 1.2 billion people, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced Tuesday night that those 2 commonly held denominations would be taken out of circulation to combat corruption and black market trade. New notes with better security features will replace them, but some will take time to get into circulation. Businesses will stop accepting the old bills this week, while Indians have until the end of December to exchange their old notes at banks. The Indian government has asked people not to panic in the initial few days, but clearly people are not paying any heed. Long queues are being seen outside banks of people trying to change whatever little savings they have into cash that they can use.
India's Prime Minister visits Japan to sign a landmark civil nuclear agreement. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be in Japan for 3 days to consult with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe starting Thursday, November 10th. The leaders will meet in Tokyo to sign a deal that gives India better access to nuclear reactors, fuel, and technology from Japan. The deal is a result of 6 years of negotiations between the 2 countries. It will be Japan's first nuclear deal with a country that hasn't signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which aims to prevent global testing and sharing of nuclear weapons. So far, India has insisted on keeping its right to conduct nuclear tests, citing concerns about its nuclear-armed rivals China and Pakistan. However, India might choose to make an exception. The country reportedly needs Japan's cutting-edge nuclear technology in order to support its fast-growing economy.
Well, the Daesh terror group has reportedly fired mortar shells containing toxic chlorine gas into a strategic district in Iraq's northern Salahuddin province. A security source says at least 15 shells landed in a village around Shirgat, which lies some 80 kilometers south of Mosul. The source says a number of people died as a result of the attack. The chemical attack took place 2 months after Iraqi forces liberated Shirat.
Human Rights Watch and local residents say the town of Karaya, south of Mosul, has been the target of several chemical attacks by ISIL in the last 3 months. According to reports, ISIL has launched 4 chemical weapons attacks on civilians. The UN says the militant group has stockpiles of ammonia and sulfur in civilian areas, and it's feared that ISIL is planning more chemical attacks in Mosul, the group's last major stronghold in Iraq. Karaya is some 50 kilometers south of Mosul. The last chemical attack on the town took place just before the current offensive began on October 17th.
A rocket fell close to us. It hit the coffee shop and fell inside. When the rocket exploded, the chemical seeped out of it. Gas spread over the buildings. It produced a bad smell.
It caused a disaster here. There were children out, families, the house was damaged. We were all affected. Some had tears streaming down their face. Others had complications in their stomachs.
Struck 91 kilometres northeast of the city of Christchurch soon after midnight.
A magnitude 5 earthquake rocks Quezon province. The earthquake, which hit the afternoon of Thursday, November 10th, was also felt in Metro Manila and Tarlac City. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology originally recorded the quake as a 4.4 at its epicenter in General Nakar. The force was eventually upgraded to a magnitude of 5. The force of a magnitude 5 earthquake is classified as moderate, according to the modified Mercalli intensity scale. This means the quake is widely felt and may cause minor damage, such as broken windows and dishes, as well as tipping of unstable furniture. While no significant damage has been reported, the Volcanology and Seismology Institute says aftershocks were to be expected.
According to officials, dozens of buildings sustained substantial damage after a 5.0 magnitude earthquake struck an Oklahoma town on Sunday night. In a statement, a spokesman said that 40 to 50 buildings were damaged in the earthquake, which was the third in Oklahoma this year.
GeoNet at a magnitude of 6.6.
We begin with the latest news from the magnitude 7.8 earthquake which has struck New Zealand. At least 6 strong aftershocks measuring more than magnitude 5 have been felt in the region. The tremors knocked out power in some areas and sent people into streets across the country. A tsunami hit the northeast coast of the South Island, and New Zealand's civil defence asked residents on the east coast of the island to seek higher ground. The US Geological Survey says the quake was just 10 kilometers deep and
with a magnitude of 5.0 or greater. No major injuries have been reported. Sunday's quake was centered 1 mile west from the town of Cushing and about 25 miles south of where a magnitude 4.3 quake recently forced a shutdown of several oil wells last week. The quake struck around 8 p.m. Sunday night and was reportedly felt as far away as Iowa, Illinois, and Texas.
After 60 years in hiding, tropical bedbugs are re-emerging across Florida. We're talking about a bed.
The U.S. Geological Survey said an earthquake with a magnitude of 7.4 struck central New Zealand just after midnight. The quake knocked out power in some areas and sent people into the streets of the capital of Wellington. Advising residents on the South Island's east coast to seek higher ground, New Zealand's civil defense issued a tsunami warning. The tremor was measured by New Zealand